Okay, so our next speakers, we're going to have a very lovely panel from the Fair Play Alliance. And I'm just going to introduce you to the moderator, Natasha Miller. She's a senior scientist, a research scientist at Blizzard. And I'm just going to let you introduce your lovely panelist. Thank you so much, Natasha, and everybody, and Rob, and Kim, and where's Nate? Do I see Nate? Is Nate here? Yes, I can see you. Awesome. So thank you so much for taking the time to share with us. And I'm just going to stop my video and let you take the show.
Yes. Yeah, thank you and welcome to the Fair Play Alliance update panel. So just in case there's anyone here who's not familiar with what the Fair Play Alliance is, we are a global coalition of gaming professionals and companies, and we actually provide a forum for members to work together to develop and share best practices and encouraging healthy communities and awesome player interactions in gaming. And we've been around for a few years now, so we wanted to just go ahead and give you an update on what we've been working on in the last year. So everyone that I have on the panel here today is part of the executive steering committee for the Fair Play Alliance. But they come from a lot of different backgrounds and companies. So I'm going to let each panelist say a little bit about themselves. I'll go ahead and start since I'm already talking. I'm Natasha Miller. I'm a senior research scientist at Blizzard on the Player Interactions and Trust team. Our team works at combating disruptive behaviors across all of our games, but I specifically lead an initiative called Behavior by Design, which is used to encourage positive play, nudge players in more of a pro-social behavior, and try to prevent some disruptive behaviors from occurring in the first place. So if we want to go over, and I'll let Rob tell you a little bit about himself.
Hi. So yeah, first of all, just really want to say thanks for having me on this call. So yeah, my name is Rob Lewington. I'm a senior director of what we call safety operations at Twitch, and what that means is kind of what it says. It's the operational bits of keeping our users on Twitch safe. Prior to that, I've been in gaming for, I guess, about 12 years now. I worked at PlayStation for a long time. And yeah, really just excited to be here and talk a bit more about the Fair Play Alliance. Shall I pass it off to Nate next, maybe?
Hey, sure. Hi, I am Nate Sawatzky, and I am the Trust and Safety Lead at Supercell. We're a mobile gaming company up in Helsinki, Finland. And we create games that are played by as many people as possible, enjoyed for years, and remembered forever. And on the Trust and Safety team, I see our part in that is making sure that people remember the games for the right reasons. When people have negative interactions and they experience disruptive behavior, it creates a tension, and they don't get to enjoy the games and escape and have fun like they should be able to. So that's what we focus on. So I could pass it over to Kim.
Hello, thank you, Nate. Hi, I'm Kimberly Voll. I'm a researcher and game developer specializing in human interaction in games as well as AI. So I spent a lot of time thinking about why people do what they do and how we can leverage AI in those capacities. I'm also a programmer and engineer by training. I have a PhD in computer science as well as a cognitive science degree. I'm the co-founder of the Fair Play Alliance and the current executive director. And I also co-run Stray Bombay, a gaming studio focused on cooperative games.
So thank you everyone for giving a little bit of an introduction. So let's just jump right into some of the projects we've been working on in the last year. And we actually have a really exciting one that's coming out very soon. That was a collaboration with the ADL. So Kim, do you want to tell us a little bit about the disruption and harms in online gaming framework?
Boy, do I. Yeah, we're really excited. So the Disruption and Harms in Online Gaming Framework is a catalog of the types, forms, and consequences of disruptive and harmful behavior in gaming. It includes a broader look at the underlying root causes as well. So, where these things are coming about and what's driving those behaviors. And really it is, as an industry, up to this point, we've kind of lacked a sufficiently robust and unified foundation to really go deep on what's been going on in games. There's been inconsistent awareness about the nature and the scope of what we've seen in gaming. And for a long time, we've had really, vague or overly ambiguous kind of ways of referring to this, like, toxicity as an umbrella term, terms that don't really afford the nuance and depth needed to understand the forces behind what's driving hate and harassment in gaming, or how we can do a better job of fostering connection and create digital spaces that really reflect us as humans, while still capturing the magic of games. And, I think overall games are incredibly powerful. I mean, where else can you, grow a garden together, save the world, travel to another planet, and push each other in a shopping cart, all in the same afternoon, right? But games are these incredibly human spaces, and digital spaces are just not as rich as in-person spaces, and really lack a lot of the social protocols and other aspects that help us relate to one another and build trust. And so this project was really us stepping back and coming together as an industry to dig really deep to understand what we were seeing globally across many different types of games, the types of things that were manifesting as disruptive and harmful behavior, and really try to understand what those were to measurably move us forward as an industry.
Yeah, it's really awesome. But how specifically do you feel like companies would be able to use this framework?
So the framework is really, it's built on a number of different pieces. So the intent wasn't to really say, this is exactly how you have to talk about everything. It was really much more to provide a foundational look at what's happening in games. And so, we focus on the expression, the types of things that can manifest, the channels where they can pop up, the root causes, and of course the consequences of these behaviors. And the intent is to be comprehensive in how we're thinking about and tackling these issues. So for those who are looking to use the framework, it's really about sharing with your teams and anyone who works in this space or whose work might be influenced by these issues, where you need to work to broaden your internal vocabulary to pull in all of these aspects. The goal, of the framework is really to use this to help the industry make sure we're focusing on the right areas. We're leaving no stone unturned when it comes to disruptive and in particular harmful behaviors, although, it's all very important, because even what might be the most innocuous disruptive behavior can fundamentally destabilize and interfere with our ability to make these really rich connected spaces and have players really reach the full enjoyment that we intend from them. And then, just in general, hold your teams accountable to understand the risks and the opportunities to address these issues. What are you seeing in your games, in your platforms? What might you see if you're about to launch a new game, or you're, considering new games that you want to work on? Prioritize conversations to see what you can do, and use the framework to seed those conversations. We know you can't fix everything, but we can all do better. And one of the other things that's coming with the framework and will continue to deliver against in 2021 is a series of resources that are actually seeking to operationalize the framework. We know it's not feasible for everyone to read this. It's pretty comprehensive. I think it'll be 46 pages. It's launching next week on Wednesday. But we know it's not reasonable to necessarily read all of that. So a lot of what we've tried to do is really translate this into meaningful, actionable tools that any of us as developers can look at and apply in our day-to-day work. And we're always looking to partner with new folks to lift up the learnings across the industry and all of the great work that's been going on, so that we can continue to get it in the hands of developers and ensure that we're creating, better, more inclusive, more welcoming spaces that really let our games reach their full potential.
I think one of the points you made there, Kim, was particularly important for us whenever we're thinking about how we're going to use it. We have a tendency oftentimes to put players in one of two categories. They're either good players or bad players. And there's so many nuances. And even as we went through the process of creating the framework, the language that we started to be able to form and have to be able to use to be able to talk about that wide array of players, it helps change the way that we can create policies, because whenever we stop thinking about players as fundamentally good or fundamentally bad, and we think about all of the gray that exists, it allows us to start to create even tooling and the way that we talk to players in such a way that we start to kind of pull out and say, okay, look, this is disruptive. How can we address that particular form of disruption and maybe take that player and redeem it so that they actually can come back and be a positive part of the community, as opposed to simply putting them into the bad guy category and saying, no, you're toxic, we don't want you.
Yeah, well said. I mean, that's one of the reasons too, the production of this framework was very much, for the industry, by the industry. It was an incredible effort across the industry to come together to synthesize the efforts of developers from around the world, as well as some, incredible researchers in civil society and academia who are experts in human psychology and sociology, who can help us understand at a deeper level what's happening in these spaces and what it is about us as human beings that can cause these types of behavior patterns, you know. And so our goal was really to create a not just comprehensive, but, you know, a shared and authentic reflection of disruptive behavior in online gaming as we know it today. You know, it's very much rooted in what we know about humans in digital spaces, the power of games as cultural media, the opportunities that we have as game developers to make spaces better suited for players playing together, rather than us ending up in an arms race we'll never win of just increasing moderation. This is really about how do we systemically start to look at maybe how the ways in which we're making choices for our games or our gaming spaces or our gaming platforms, and be more proactive in creating spaces that foster, you know, better interactions and healthier coexistence in all of our games.
Yeah, and I love that it's actually done in a way that it's very comprehensive. So whether you're an indie studio or a AAA, whether you make mobile games or PC console games, it's really applicable to everyone in any situation, and you can find something very useful across it. I did want to make sure that we call out when it releases on Wednesday, where will people be able to find it?
So you will be able to find it on our website, so www.fairplayalliance.org, under our resources section. We'll have, you know, we're putting out a press release as well, and so we'll have some social media and whatnot going around, but that's where it will live. It will also live on the website of the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League. So we partnered very closely with their Center for Technology and Society, and they were just a tremendous resource for us in helping, you know, bringing their expertise in reducing hate and harassment and fostering greater inclusivity in spaces overall. So we're very excited from both organizations to be launching this and to be working, you know, on behalf of the gaming industry and as developers ourselves.
Yeah, and if you want to add us on Twitter, we're at FairPlayA or FairPlaya. And we will be sending out a notice via Twitter when it is up on our website next Wednesday. Okay, so we're really excited about that. Hopefully Wednesday comes and everyone will have access to it. But I want to talk about another collaboration that we went through this year with My Games. So maybe Rob, you can talk a little bit about the My Games collaboration.
Absolutely, yeah. So another collaboration, as Natasha says, that we went through this year was Fair Play Alliance partnered with My Games and Take This and IGDA, so that's International Games Developers Association, and this was to create an international survey to understand more about how players are feeling and what their understanding is of mental health in gaming. There was a sort of lens from this through, you know, the pandemic that's obviously going on and it has an effect for people. So we were trying to understand things like, you know, what are players' awareness of mental health issues? What is their awareness of mental health resources that they can potentially use? How frequently have people been playing during the pandemic? Has disruption, has harm in gaming, has it changed at all during and you know, due to the pandemic? And the results of that survey will come out in Q1. So we're hoping to have those then, and then companies can use that. The idea is that that's kind of a call to action for the field to start looking at the relationship between mental health and gaming. That data will give us the landscape that we need to understand players' familiarity with these issues and with the resources that are available, and looking into players' mental health issues and how they've sort of changed and how they've evolved during the pandemic and what those needs are. It also looks into players, how they interact with others through video games and during the pandemic and how that's affected them as well. So yeah, lots of interesting stuff in that as well. So I believe it's still open, I believe. It's not still open. Okay. Well.
No, it is closed now, but yeah, we are really excited. We need time to crunch the numbers and actually have something to put out, hopefully early Q1. But
Fantastic.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rob, for going over.
No worries. So yeah, an exciting thing, and like I say, if it's not still open, we'll at least have the data available during Q1.
Can I just say, I think one of the things that's interesting within the questions that were asked in the survey was this whole part. Like we talk about kind of mental health and mental well-being often in our work, but not everybody does. Like it's not common in everybody's language. And I think one of the bits of the survey was it talks about, have you heard about mental health? Like, are these things that you've thought about before? Have you ever sought help? And I'm really interested to find out how many people come back and say, no, this is not something that I think about ever. Or you know, especially after this year, if this year has maybe raised the awareness of it and people are thinking about it more than they used to, I think that's going to be a particularly interesting output of that.
Yeah, one of the really interesting things about online spaces is that, you know, as much as they seem to afford these really rich interactions and we're running around in these cool worlds and games together, I mean, they are fairly limited. We lack nonverbal communication and body language, or at least, you know, our avatars act as our proxies for that body language, but it's not the same as being in a shared space. And, you know, when you're struggling with things, I think that often is even more hidden. And it's one of the reasons why gaming spaces, I think, are appealing, because you can come into them and you can feel a sense of belonging while, you know, choosing the rate at which you share, you know, things about yourself. But it also speaks to the other side, that when we do see things going off the rails in games sometimes, or somebody losing their cool, I mean, oftentimes there's a much bigger struggle behind that. There's a much bigger story. And I think we have a unique opportunity as game developers to rethink, for example, what we mean by the help menu. You know, like, imagine if a help menu was really more about a player's well-being, and sure, serve up how to play the game and have fun and participate and whatever else things, you know, would fall under a help menu. But what if it was really about helping the person too, and just really destigmatizing and surfacing those things up? And so it's something we talk a lot about in the FPA, and it's certainly an area of focus for us, you know, as we go forward into 2021.
Yeah, and actually, speaking of going forward in 2021, we haven't worked out all of the details yet, but I do want to mention that another thing that we will have upcoming as project-wise is child safety and gaming workshops and roundtables. Those will be happening all throughout 2021, so that'll be a project that we're really excited about next year as well. So yeah, that's a lot of the big projects that we've worked on in 2020. But we have several resources that are also being contributed by our members throughout the year. So I wanted to go ahead and make sure that we talk a little bit about what's available and what's upcoming. So for the webinars that are available, does Nate, maybe you want to talk about a couple of the webinars currently available on our website?
Oh, yes, but I actually have to find some notes here quickly, so give me a second.
Actually, while you're looking that up, I did want to flag to another organization that is doing, there's a lot of great organizations out there today, but is doing some really great work, particularly in the space of mental health, is Take This. And, you know, we've had some phenomenal conversations and are excited to be doing more work with them. And they were contributors to the framework as well. But I did want to bubble it up as an organization that should definitely be on your radar, and some incredible people.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a few webinars that we can talk about. So one is, it's a webinar called Complex But Very Human, Rethinking Safety and Well-Being for Players. And this is being done by Stadio, am I saying that right? Stadio UX Research. This was one of the official talks of our Fair Play Summit. It'll be a closed webinar, only available to our members. Nudge, nudge. There's a light webinar, which is, oh, how do we talk about the light webinar? There is some notes here on this one too.
Yeah, so it is actually how regulation, tech, and humans are needed to provide safe and healthy spaces online. And it'll be by Light, Google, and Small Giant. So the first one by Stadia, that's for members only, will be in January 2021. And the one by Light, Google, and Small Giant will likely be in February. And it's not clear if that'll be members only or open to the public yet.
Yeah. And then one of the other things that we're working on this year, this was like, 2020 was supposed to be the year where at the beginning of the year, you had these project ideas and you thought like, hey, I'm going to do this thing. This is like the perfect year. We're trapped at home. I'm going to have totally time to start an FPA podcast. And I remember feeling that really strongly in March, and we're now in December and we're still kind of chugging away at it. But in 2021, we're looking to have a podcast that kind of looks at the gaming industry from a sociologist standpoint, and tries to find the voices within the industry and even voices outside of the industry that are thinking about the way that we come together, the way that we build communities, the way that we build social structures, and how are we thinking about it in light of everything that we learned this year? How are we thinking about it in light of history? And how are we as an industry evolving our thinking and what can we share with other people to think about how we build healthy and robust communities.
Yeah, it's really exciting. And do we know if that's going to be members only or open to public?
I don't think we know yet. I think it'd be open for everybody. I hope it'll be open for everybody, but we might trial it internally. We'll see. Maybe we'll create more incentive for people to want to join the FPA. We'll say it's members only for now.
Well, let's say that if you want to join the FPA, you can go to our website and sign up. If you are in the gaming industry at all, you're pretty much going to be open to being a member. We do try to keep it to gaming professionals and gaming companies only right now, though. But right on our website, under the members page, you can sign up to become a member, and you will have all of this open to you either way.
Yeah, one thing to call out with membership. So, as Tasha introduced at the beginning, we're very much an alliance. So we're game developers coming together around a shared problem of how do we actually, proactively and to a lesser extent reactively think about how we make games and the process and our own unique understanding of interplay and game mechanics, et cetera, to be able to apply what we know about human behavior, et cetera, and how we interact and all of these different pieces toward this goal of healthier interactions. And so we really focus on lifting up the work that's already out there, making sure that as an industry, we are all equipped with the tools to build healthy spaces. This is not a space where we feel like we need to be competing as an industry. I mean, fundamentally, players have a right to expect safe, inclusive, welcoming spaces, and I think we have a growing responsibility as an industry to invest in that space, to do more for that space. But we also recognize as an organization that, accountability comes through empowerment. And, while there has been a lot of great effort and so much is worth celebrating, there still remains huge gaps and huge opportunities for us to do more. And a big part of this and, the framework, but also all of the work that we do is really making sure that we are equipping developers with those tools, that we are lifting up those learnings, that we're using, we're about to cross 200 participating companies around the world, that we're using all of these incredible folks who have stepped up to be a part of the Fair Play Alliance and using it to generate these really robust resources and opportunities and conversations and helping ask the right questions to help us focus and ensure that we are on using the best practices. We are focusing on the right areas. We are closing the right gaps. We are doing the things that are most important to support players and help games reach their full potential.
Yeah, very well said. Thank you. And I did have a Q&A come across, which I think will be a good segue for us, but it's, do you have strategic advice for individual UX practitioners in the game space who are working bottom up from a product feature focused work, but want to help influence game and online safety? So I'm going to just say that we do have resources currently up on our website for anybody, whether you're a member or not, and some of which may help with that. Like we have a Player Dynamics 101 webinar up that was done by the head of Player Dynamics at Riot, and he goes over some of these very basic, like where to start sort of questions that can answer some of that. Also, we have EA's Inclusive Design Framework, which again is very much if you're trying to start these kinds of things, it's a webinar that goes over some of those things. So that's something you can look into, but I'm curious if our panelists have any advice as well.
Sure, yeah.
Do you want to go, Nate?
Yeah, sure.
Please.
I had an opportunity years ago. I worked for the Walt Disney Company for a product called Club Penguin, which was a children's virtual world. And whenever we were designing for safety, safety was like, it was absolutely paramount to what we were trying to do. We wanted to create something that was at the time completely antithetical to all of the experiences that children were gravitating towards online because they weren't made for kids. So we had to really think about what did it mean for us to like build safety into what it is that we were doing. We didn't have a lot of rule books at that point or any playbooks to be able to know how to do that. So we kind of just looked to the real world and we kind of tried and took as many cues from, particularly when we were thinking about kids. And I think this applies more broadly than just children, but for kids, we thought about, okay, if we were to send a child to a playground, what would we do to kind of make that playground a safe space? And so we thought about, okay, Club Penguin is kind of like lunch hour at a playground when kids are at school, and there's noon hour supervisors who are there. They're not in every corner. In fact, there's lots of places where you can go and you might be able to get into a little bit of trouble, but ultimately there's always a trusted adult somewhere nearby. And so when we thought about the role of the moderator, and when we thought about the role of the technology and how you would call a moderator to say, hey, I'm having a problem, how did we think about the response time? How did we think about a response to the child? So anyways, long way of saying, I think that whenever we think about designing safety, we have to sometimes think about what the real world applications are. What do people already know? What have we kind of learned in society to be able to say, this is how we react, this is how I call for help, this is where I look for help. And then whenever we're building that into our games and we're building that into our systems, we want it to feel intuitive. Like Kim was saying earlier, the help button, we've kind of gotten used to the help button being a little thing that pops up and says, well, if you push this over here, you'll go that way. But really, help is kind of that thing that says, I need help. And so how do we put that element of actually helping someone in a social situation also into those sort of menus?
Yeah, well said. Just add a little bit to that too. I think in terms of just the overall process and how we think about it, first recognizing you can't do everything and you can't solve every problem. These are incredibly difficult problems. These are rich spaces with all of the complexity that comes with humanity, and those are the things that make online gaming with other people such incredible experiences. And they're also what make it complicated. So as part of a process, I think stepping back and identifying first and foremost, what are the risks and opportunities in the space? If this is a live game, what's happening? What are you observing in that space? What are you observing with players? What are you observing in and around marginalized or vulnerable groups? And I think really going through a robust exercise of identifying what are your values? What's important to you in a game? What's important to be true in your communities? And what's important to you as a company? It's surprising how often the values that we hope to see arise in our games are not always that consistent with the values we bring day to day within our own studios. It's hard, it's very difficult. And that task of operationalizing those values is incredibly difficult as well. But by going through that activity, by identifying what's important, like what are the things you celebrate about your game? What are the things that are truly important? And then what are the things that are disruptive to that experience? And building out a core set of values, then those become really the pillars, right? The lighthouse to which you can hold up every other decision that you're making. And so then when you're creating features against that, as UX experts, thinking through that experience, that flow, looking to make sure that those things are always upholding those values, that at very least, you're not throwing things into confusion, you're not accidentally contradicting things, and you're thinking of all of those, that whole player journey, it's really a broader map, right? Because it includes everything from the player's journey and their experience to the broader context in which these situations occur, to the developers that are maintaining these systems, to the player support agents that are interfacing, to the community managers. All of those are touch points where pain can arise as a result of this, where people can struggle to know what to do in certain situations. And so being at least comprehensive in mapping that out, even if you have to be very intentional in what you prioritize and knowing that you can't do it all. When you know what your values are, then it makes that priority conversation so much easier. And then you can identify short-term things you can do different tomorrow. You can identify the big goals, where you want to be in a year, in 5 years, in 10 years, and then you can map that out accordingly. And then everything starts to fall out of that.
And if I can just kind of plus one to that, really, I wanted to let Nate and Kim go first because they're right now much more involved in actual game design than I am. If you can imagine at Twitch, we're in the gaming ecosystem, we're not designing games as such. But I think it's a really, really good point around the sort of values conversations. And obviously in my time working in the gaming industry as well, you see that sort of thing come up a lot. And I'll use an example, it's not a real example, but you can imagine a game that is being suggested. Let's say it's a card game and your key focus on that game is playing cards. Somewhere down the development cycle, somebody says, well, yeah, it'd be great to have chat in there. But you've got to think about, the potential dangers, as Kim is saying, potential risk of chat. What can go wrong in chat? How do you operationalize safety for chat? And I'll talk a bit more as we in this session about sort of content moderation and things like that. But that's not a simple thing. And if your key focus is to get people to play cards, then your focus is probably not going to be on safety, and that could ruin your entire experience. So I've seen that happen a lot of times, and I think those difficult conversations are really, really important. Really, I'm just repeating what Kim said, but just a little bit more emphasis from my side as well. So
I love the point that you make, Rob. Like, there's always we always want to add social, and we feel like we need to add social to everything. And sometimes a card game is just a great card game, and you don't need to add more to it, make it more complicated.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that was a good segue to start talking about the other resource that we do have available on our website, which is white papers. Currently, we only have one white paper up on why game developers need to engage parents to keep their communities healthy. This was done by Roblox and Aberdeen University. So that is available for everyone, but we have some more coming up in the next year or so. And I know Rob actually has one he's really excited to talk about that'll be up there in the next year.
there you go, exactly. Fantastic segue, because it's really kind of, I almost didn't want to preempt myself by talking about it, but it's such a passion area for me, because I think it's an important point, and we've sort of highlighted the disruption and harms in online gaming framework. We've highlighted player dynamics, and I think a lot in the industry, certainly in gaming, but also in social media, we talk a lot about safety by design as well. And all that I think is absolutely paramount. And again, going back to what Nate said about, you know, the real world, we think about the real world, the important thing that we're doing all of those things is to prevent harm from happening to begin with. So if we can design our structures of society, let's say, and our rules and whatever it might be to prevent harm from happening, that's obviously our ideal state. But we also need to, I think, to be realistic about the fact that such a goal is unlikely to happen in real life. So it's also quite unlikely to happen in a video game. And therefore, we also have to think about content moderation. So we're not going to solve this, as Kim said, purely through reactive content moderation. That's a losing battle, but it's nevertheless also going to be a part of what we do. So the white paper that I'm putting together, and it's in the early stages, and I'm just sort of drafting and getting all together all the research at this point, but it's to do with those best practices for when you do have to do that content moderation. And the way I kind of think about it is, again, going to the real world example, if you have an issue that's happened to you, something bad has happened to you, or at least something that you're upset about, you're passionate about, and you want to let someone know about, you need to have a good mechanism to inform the people that can do something about it. And you think about that, let's say it's, I mean, you know, often in this field we talk about law enforcement, but maybe it's something simpler than that. Maybe it's, you know, there's a crosswalk, you know, there's a busy road and you want to get a crosswalk put in. You don't mind going through the filling out of forms if you think that by filling out that form correctly and providing the information you need, it's going to be actionable. So there's a symbiosis here, I think. And I think what's really important is that we give people the mechanisms in the UX design, in the reporting design mechanism, that allow them to provide the relevant information, that then allow the companies to both take action. So there's actionable information. It's not, you know, something happened to me, go and get this guy, I don't like him. It provides and bakes into the process and into the design the information, the evidence that is going to be necessary. Now that not only means that the company can look at it and say, hey, okay, we can make an assessment. There's values conversations, there's policy conversations about how you make those assessments, but at least the content that you're reviewing is then clear. But it also means you can design it in a way that scales. We talked about the card game example. It might be that, you know, the chat in the card game is not a very used feature. It might be the most used feature. It might become a way in which people communicate, in which case you're going to be able to scale that and you're going to be able to react to your users' issues. So we build those mechanisms in such a way that they do scale, they naturally scale, and they're actionable, and we can actually respond to our users' issues. I think that's an important part of this kind of cycle, if you like, through safety by design, through player dynamics, and then through moderation as well. So that's that end part of the cycle that I'm looking at through a particular lens of what we call a targeted moderation. So yeah, hopefully something again, hopefully Q1 again is the big number, and we'll get that out next year. So yeah.
Yeah, Thank you. I'm really excited to read that paper, Rob. And then I'm just going to go ahead and also say that I'm also writing a white paper for our resources page. It's based on a previous GDC talk I give, but it's looking at how you can utilize feedback loops, something we use in video games all the time, to actually increase trust in your systems. We used it to increase trust in our reporting system so that everything that comes after a report happens more smoothly, more accurately, and more efficiently. Also, how you can use this same system to nudge your players in more of a pro-social direction, how you can actually use it to get them to change their behavior slightly so that you don't have to go on to penalize them. So that will also be upcoming in either late Q1 or early Q2 2021 on our website. So that is the main topics that we wanted to talk about with what we've done in 2020 and some of our upcoming ideas for 2021 for the Fair Play Alliance. But I do want to open it for questions and answers at this point, since we do still have some time left. Try to do it through the Q&A button because the chat's a little bit more difficult for us to follow.
One thing I'll just add while we're waiting for folks to jump over to Q&A too, on just in terms of kind of the process and some of the themes that just came up that Rob and Natasha, you both just brought up as well, is oftentimes the way that we think about the space and our quest to build healthier spaces is really kind of on the heel of three core strategies. First is the environment. Like, what is the environment that you're building? How does it afford certain behavior patterns? How does it send messages about the values that are important, about what players should be doing? Are you reinforcing the things that you want to see, or do you have, characters in game or other aspects that maybe unintended sources of friction or conflict, maybe mismatched expectations, things in the general gaming space that might be causing issues or that provide an opportunity to re-up on those values and set the example that you want holistically throughout the entire experience. The second is then encouragement. So are you setting the examples that you want to see? Are you building things in as habits? Are you exposing mechanics and opportunities for players to actually build trust and establish trust with one another? I mean, Nate made such a great point about there's so much risk when you just drop voice into a space, not because voice is inherently bad. It's a much richer way to interact than having to type everything out, especially in the heat of battle. But I think that what we sometimes fail to take into enough consideration is that the ability nonetheless to have successful encounters is based on a foundation of trust. And if you've just dropped into an experience where you've never met these folks before, or maybe you don't have any kind of shared foundation, maybe you're coming from different backgrounds, from different expectations, maybe you're coming off the heels of a loss, maybe you're hangry, maybe you just don't necessarily have the same way of communicating. Like, all of these things come together and generate friction and difficulty. And then when, in general, we have some bad habits and we don't necessarily respond with the benefit of the doubt or whatnot, it just sort of fuels that fire. And so putting tools in, putting explicit time into features, into interfaces, mechanics, all the different tools and bells and whistles that we have as game developers that are built around fostering the right kinds of habits, that are allowing us to have positive interactions without really any downside. The ability to high five one another or interact with an emote, or low risk stepping stones to building trust can move you toward where you need to be. And then the third thing is just consequences, as Rob mentioned. Like, we're very conscious of the importance of clear, consistent consequences, of being able to set those guardrails and not being afraid to draw a line in the sand and say, this is acceptable and this is not. We just recognize that one of the best things you can do is to proactively look at the ways in which you might be driving players down that path, or you might be failing to set those expectations up front. And so leaving players to sort of explore the space and test those limits. So you want to be thoughtful about being teachable with your consequences. You want to understand very clearly what is disruptive. You want to understand what players could be expected to know, but you want to very much be firm with those consequences as well. So I just wanted to call that out because I think it's such a core piece to the work that we do. And when we're starting to explore opportunities in the space, think about the environment and all of those things. And one thing I'll flag too is some games it's just harder. If a game is about, I don't know, like stealing resources from one another, or has all these things baked in. It's not that it's a bad game. It might be a perfectly fantastic game. It's just, it will make it harder. And so recognizing that is important. Know the game that you are, and then ask really hard, critical questions about, do we need these sources of friction? Because you will ultimately pay some price for them. And so just being able to balance that and know your trade-offs. So, you know, environment, consequences, and encouragement.
Yeah, very well said, Kim.
Sorry, Natasha. I mean, just also jump in there. I think it's a great point about consequences. I think consequences are, you know, the other thing that you're doing if you don't have that you're incentivizing. If you don't have any consequences, is also, and I think this is one of the issues that we've seen as an industry with regard to voice comms. Voice comms is very difficult to moderate properly. But I think, you know, that's kind of a really kind of like important area for us to focus on, because traditionally there's been a sort of a mindset perhaps, or an attitude that has incentivized in people that perhaps you know, there are no consequences there as well. So I think that's kind of a really important point too. I notice there's a question now, so I'll let you get to that.
Oh no, this is great. I'm sure this is very useful for everyone to hear as well. But we did have a question come in. They say, as someone who wants to break out into the industry, are there tips or some sort of checklist of what someone like me should be looking at while designing? How do you cultivate this attitude or perspective to proactively advocate for fair play?
What a fantastic question. I love it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a big one, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I can throw a couple thoughts in. I'm sure everyone has some good ideas on this, but I mean, it's such a great call out, because this is, you know, on one hand, you might say, well, this is just, you know, it's just game development. We should be thinking about these things anyway, because these are multiplayer games if you're working on a multiplayer game. But the reality is, I think it's not. When you think about game development historically and the process of game design and UX and just the whole game making process, historically, these aren't really things that were necessarily in the game maker's toolkit. You know, I think we've thought a lot about the human element in the context of games, and obviously I'm, you know, preaching to the choir as I'm surrounded by, you know, some amazing experts, anyway, you know what I mean. You're awesome, and so, you know, obviously you think a lot about humans in this space, but I think where we've really kind of recognized a gap and an opportunity is where we are. Where there's human to human interaction. Like, what happens when there's multiple minds, when there's multiple intentions, right? When we create spaces, we're often thinking about the user's journey, right? That one user going through this journey. But what happens when there's multiple users in there? You know, I mean, we need to be able to find a way to bring those things together. And so I think a path to that is you know, to advocating for fair play is starting to recognize that and creating structures and tools and frameworks to be able to have those conversations and to be able to articulate the value of this work. You know, when you're in a game with other people and you feel like that well-oiled machine, when you feel safe and able to comfortably participate as your authentic self, you know, there's no greater feeling. Those are when games are really reaching their full potential, and that's what we need to be building toward, because if not, we're doing a disservice to not just our games, but to players. And I think that's the thing that's so important.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that, and it's maybe even a little bit of a repeat, is whenever we think about game design, some of the most interesting game designers and developers that I know, they're always thinking about things through two lenses, right? There's the game design, but then there's something else. There's like another thing that they're really interested in. And so I think for a lot of us, our interest is in people, communities, gatherings. And so it's doing, like, I mean, I spend a lot of time reading sociology and understanding the way that communities have gathered in the past and gather in the present, and the way that policy and governance has shaped the way that people come together. And so that's the lens that I use to apply to whenever I get to speak into the games that we're designing at Supercell. And I think just having that broad focus is always a good thing. So to the question of how do you kind of develop that muscle, I think it's by being curious outside of game design to bring into game design.
Yeah, and if I can also sort of create a callback to the first thing we talked about, which was the disruption and harms framework. that's almost the building block. I say almost, it actually is the building block of the language and the framework that we will use as companies to create these kinds of checklists, so that when we're creating games and we're thinking about these things, then we can do these sorts of checklists. I think that's kind of going to be the building block for those sorts of resources being developed as well. So I think that's also another important future thing that will come out of this current release that we're going to do.
Yep, and that actually segues great into the next question, which is what resources do the FPA panelists use to find more ideas for improvement and continue learning about this field?
Well, I love what Nate just said. Was exactly, I'd just seen that question. I was going to say something similar, which is, and this is a theme that's coming up, right? The real world. So something outside of gaming, or outside the online world as well, because obviously, from a Twitch perspective, we're in that social media gaming kind of bubble. But there are mechanisms for these things. And something I wanted to say earlier, actually, that I forgot to say as I was speaking, was that another great thing about the FPA that I've found as a member is that, whenever we're doing these things, you want to reduce the amount you have to reinvent the wheel as much as possible, right? And again, creating these resources and these materials, that's one of the important reasons that we do it. But again, the real world is a great source of inspiration for not having to reinvent wheels, because we have systems of, let's say, restorative justice, and we have systems of, decreasing recidivism and things like that we can leverage and we can think about. And again, not to kind of plug FPA as a thing that everyone should sign up to, but it has been a great learning experience, because we're sharing data, we're sharing learnings, and we're understanding what things work well and what things don't work well. So again, pulling those things from real life, I think, are a really, really good way to do that.
Yeah, and on that topic, one of the areas that I've been looking into recently to see what learnings I could pull from, as an example, would be all of the anti-bullying campaigns in schools that happened in the real world. Like, what did we learn from that? Are there learnings we can pull from that real world example that we can bring into our games? This is something I'm still looking into, so I don't have the answers for you on that, but that's another example of how it's actually finding resources outside of the game spectrum, since this is such a novel area.
And one that I like, sorry to keep talking, but one that I like is the intersection between privacy and safety, right? Because again, that's a real world problem. Different countries have different approaches to it. So, in some countries, you see a lot of CCTV in public places because they're more concerned about that, keeping people safe, having accountability, having evidence than which they can use to prosecute crimes. In other countries, that'll be less of a thing that people want to do. So that idea about, how much do you scan, how much do you use technology, how much do you do those things? I think that, again, if you think about the real world example, you think about how comfortable you are about being monitored in real life, and you think about how much you want to feel safe in real life, and those sorts of balances. And again, I think that helps to inform thinking. There's no necessarily right answer. And, going back to what Kim said before, as you think about your game or your service, what are those values questions that you have? Putting it through that lens, I think, is a helpful one.
So we do have one more question that's come through. Have you ever found that in the pursuit of making a less toxic community, you hamstring the formation of a community? For example, setting up voice communication to off by default, players never end up talking to each other. Worth noting, the only recent game that I had a good experience with random only voice communication was Valorant. How did they do it?
Another fantastic question. So, gosh, I have a lot of thoughts. I'll be quick because I've been talking way too much. But I think so it is a real risk, and that's where we need to be thoughtful. Is what is the balance that we are looking to strike? I think when we think about things like defaulting voice to off, I think we enter into a very dangerous space where, unfortunately, that sort of a situation tends to create unsafe spaces and harm those from marginalized or vulnerable communities, where either those folks are are kind of forced into a space where they can't fully participate in these experiences as a result. They have to be the non-voice players. And when we don't think from those perspectives, we risk not only losing that audience, but even if they are within that game, we're not serving them the full experience. We're creating a space that we say, hey, you should be in voice, but sorry, you're not comfortable, but this is really the optimum experience. So the thing I would encourage everyone to do is to think through that lens. Think through, what does a more balanced space look like, recognizing that marginalized communities are marginalized. They might not be the biggest representation in the game, but that doesn't mean they're not a huge audience and that they're worth considering. And I will say, as a female player, I will never play on voice with strangers at this point in game. And I've been playing games since the 70s. There's just no world where I will do that, because in every single game I have ever played, I have been harassed, and so my default experience now, what I've been trained to do is just constantly mute. And I there's so much more out there. There's so many more people out there that are in these difficult situations. So I think our task is really, it's a brilliant question, but that is our task, is how do we build out these rich spaces that do unlock a path to trust, that do help players like myself to a lesser extent, but more broadly, that help players who feel like they can't be their authentic selves in games truly arrive at games and come into games with the confidence that they're going to have great experiences, and that our job is to figure out that bridge to that future world.
Yeah, I would add, I think whenever we say the word community, I think we throw that word around maybe way too easily sometimes. Not all communities need to be equally intimate. And so whenever the question supposes that maybe we're hampering community, but maybe rather than hampering community, what we're doing is we're limiting it to something that's appropriate for its context. So for example, if you come to a Supercell game, the chat is there as a function to be able to communicate certain game mechanics. And it's entirely possible that you're going to meet somebody new and they're going to become a friend, and they might be somebody who you're going to build a true community with at some point. I would argue that probably our platform isn't the best place to deepen that friendship. It's a place for you to be able to come with that friend to be able to play a game, but there are places that are going to be better suited for you to have and develop and strengthen that relationship. And so I think whenever we think about like the guardrails that we may put on, like turning off voice chat or like using filtering in a game, we need to be thinking about it from the perspective is, what is the appropriate level and context and depth of community that is achievable within this context? And how can we make sure that everybody is able to get there to the same level? And Kim was saying, like, how do we make sure that marginalized communities don't feel threatened, or the vulnerable people who don't necessarily have the tenacity to be able to stand up for what they believe? How can we make sure that they're not going to be exposed to all of these things that they suddenly feel like, wow, I guess I don't matter, or shoot, I just wanted to play this game and now I have to defend my view, and it just becomes really distracting. And I would argue that actually hampers the road to what community could happen down the road if you give people the right areas and the right context and the right environment to be able to do that in.
Those are very good points. So that was all of the questions we had, and I know it's just a few minutes, so we'll let Celia use that to prep the next talk. But thank you all for coming to listen. I'm going to put our information in the chat, basically our website, fairplayalliance.org, and our Twitter handle @fairplaya. So if you want to learn more, if you want to sign up, if you want to check out some of the resources we have for free or get updates on the ones that we talked about that are upcoming, those will be the places where you'll be able to find that. So thank you everyone for listening. Thank you to the panelists who were awesome through all of this, as I knew you would be. So